check. 1 2 1 2. Welcome to the mental realm of existence. I'm your host, Jose Luis Mateo Jr. Today's episode: Magnetizing the Compass, Orientating Yourself in the Dream State, Part 2. So, the last episode, I ended up with a level 4 dream that crossed over into level 5. I wanted to give an example of crossing the threshold, and I should have provided the one for the level 4 itself, right? And that was my mistake, because that might be a little misleading to some people, actually to a lot of people who have not gone through these stages of consciousness. So recently I was blessed with a level 4, what I call a pure level 4 threshold dream, in which there were events unfolding that I had never gone through before, but with all the cognitive faculties I possessed, I did not recognize that the situation I was having was not of my waking world. I'm really happy that I have this dream to call back on now. So, without further ado, let me get my
December 14th, 6:57 a.m.
No, I'm not going to be able to read the rest of that. That's just too much strain for the voice. So this dream starts out with me being in the delivery room with my wife, who is currently in labor. The delivery room was dark. I don't remember seeing much around there, except for some people in scrubs. But I do remember holding her hand while she was giving birth. I could see the expressions on her face as she struggled to bear our child. I remember watching her thinking that I hoped there were no complications that were coming of the birth. So the baby comes out, my wife is alive, we kiss, I play with her hair a little bit, and the dream just kind of like fades, right, as if the scene was done. Now it's daytime, and I'm walking through what seems like a side street. I see a little girl playing on the street next to the edge of the block, and I recognize her as my daughter. Now, she had to be 8, 9, 10 years old at this point. I remember thinking to myself that she's near the street, and that could be a little dangerous. So let me call her closer to me, because she shouldn't be that close to the edge of the curb, right? So I called her over to me, and she came closer. And as she got closer, I remember thinking that her face is of a mystery to me, and I was curious to see what it was. Now, see, okay, let me dial myself back before I go into analysis mode. All right. So as she gets closer, I squat down and I tell her to let me get a good look at her. And I was gazing at her face, and I could see these beautiful light purple, almost lilac looking eyes. The expression on her face was that of a smiling one, and I really want to tell you the rest of this, but I gotta retain myself. Okay. So I had noticed that there wasn't too much there wasn't much distortion on her face, and I was able to get a clear shot at her. I was able to see the cheekbone structure and everything, and I smiled at her, And I remember being in awe just from seeing her facial structure and her gorgeous eyes. And I told her, your mom is going to love meeting you. And I grabbed her hand so we could cross the street. And then I woke up. See, this is what I mean by pre-lucid. This is the threshold of consciousness. I had a dream in which I have no waking experience with other than my mom giving birth and my sister giving birth. There hasn't been too many other people whose birth I've been around for. So, looking at this dream and the time span between the last birth, it's interesting that I wasn't able to see or to really get that grasp of the situation where I'm realizing, hey, this doesn't, why is this even happening? Now fast forward to later when I'm observing her face and I call her over to me. I have the inclination in my head to analyze her because I'm trying to come up with a picture of who she already is in my head, right? Because I'm assimilating this dream to my waking consciousness, my waking state. I'm assimilating an 8, 9, 10-year-old baby. We're not pregnant. We don't have kids. We ain't got none of that right now. And in looking or in being in this dream, in order to solve that mystery, I decided to gaze upon her face. That right there should have been the second or third. I want to say it's split between both, right? Because the other inclination I could have had to having that moment of crossing the threshold would have been when it went from the delivery room to the street, and it's daytime to like a side street. That should have been, from the dark delivery room to the nighttime where everything's all sunny and that should have been the second inclination. So the third one, I want to say, was definitely gazing at her face. Actually, no, the third one, the third time I could have become lucid is when I had that thought process of trying to formulate a memory as to the girl who was running closer to me, because she was maybe 20-30 feet away from me, right? In real life, I would never let my child get that close to a curb or that far away from me without being in very close proximity. So that should have also been another factor. There's so many things in there already that I've been able to pull, and still this shows that I'm trying to apply the situation to my waking life. And in seeing her eyes and in gazing upon her face, that should have been the fifth time that I was able to spot the fact that I was dreaming, right? Because now usually in a this was the interesting part. Usually in a dream, when you look at something and you try to gain definition on it, the definition changes subtly because you're applying subtle mental constructs to the situation. So if you're looking at a book that looks similar to 3 other books that you've gone through before, or that you've looked at before, or that have interested you before, and you tried to read the text would continuously change because you are applying the set from these 3 different books and who knows how many other books to the current situation. When I was gazing upon her face, in my head, I thought, like, in order for the rationale to click, I thought that she would just look like the culmination of her mother and I. And that belief right there in that construct, I only allowed, which is weird because I was pre-lucid, I only allowed myself to focus on that one situation, as if my dream body was able to remember the step that my waking body was slipping on, right? So the sixth part that should have been the inclination that I was having a dream is when I said, your mom is going to love meeting you. See, now that I remember saying that. And I remember saying that because it was one of the last things I did before I woke up, right? I told her, your mother's gonna love seeing you. I stood up, I grabbed her hand, we crossed the street, and I woke up, and my wife was getting ready for work. So the fact that I told this young lady who has, the mom as my wife, I should have already, she should have already known who she was, right? There should have been no reason for me to say your mom's going to love meeting you, which is very interesting because as I said before, I'm applying the waking construct to my dream state. And somehow that all just slid through my head. All right. Now I hope that provides a good definition and basis for level 4. Let's move on to level 5, what I love to call lucid. So crossing the threshold takes a certain amount of clarity. Before, I've compared lucid dreaming to video games, and it's probably the best analogy I have. Recognizing the pivotal moments is something similar to fighting in a video game. When that moment of clarity occurs, in the video game, it would be a button prompt. Whatever game you play or whatever device you're on, the buttons you need to press in order to go through the battle would pop up, and you have to press those buttons or else you risk dying or failing in that battle, right? It's the same way with lucidity. If you don't catch that first string, then getting the others is going to be that much more difficult. Like, you could see this symbol that says wake up or something that you'll notice in a flash, and then like you'll try to look at it and it'll just distort and it'll look like rocks afterwards or something, and you turn around and you see a unicorn and you're like, ooh, unicorn. You see what I mean? Like, it'll become more difficult for you to realize as you go through the dreams. So I have a really good dream for the level 5 lucidity. It was August 12th, 2019, sometime in the morning. Last night, I used the wild technique to generate a lucid dream. I retained my awareness while falling asleep, telling myself I'd recognize when I was dreaming. The scene went from all black to a slightly familiar hallway. I was standing in the only narrow part of this apartment. The rest opened up to the kitchen on one end and the dining room on the other, just like my old grandfather's apartment. I noticed the similarities and knew that it had been years that I had been in that apartment. So I must be dreaming. I became lucid in that exact hallway, and I walked over to the dining room around a big wooden table to this red mesh lingerie-like curtain. It's got very satiny, or I don't know how to describe that. I'm not a clothing person, whatever. I'm not an expert. But it was very, smooth, lacy. It was soft on the texture. It was soft to the touch. I ran my hand down that curtain. I decided to explore the rest of the apartment, and I went into a room that had a large mirror, and that's all I noticed. The rest of the room was just pitch black. I walked over to the mirror, wanting to look at my reflection. And when I looked at the mirror, I was terrified because this reflection of me was like almost Frankenstein-esque. I had like a bone mask on my face, and I resembled a monster. Like I looked at the mirror and I could touch my face and I could feel the texture of this mask. It was freaking scary. I remember I tried to make more out of the mask to see what I could see. I tried looking at my eyes to see if I had any irises or any kind of definition, and I didn't notice anything. It was just black. From this feeling of terror, I tried forcing myself awake. Like I applied the intention of waking myself up, but every time I did, it was like my body, I could feel my consciousness leaving, and then I would bounce right back into that room. And I tried getting out, and I bounced right back in that room. And then I tried really hard. I screamed loudly that I wanted to wake up, and I woke up in my bed. Now, as I said before, that I had used the wild technique. Now, we covered the definition and the usage of the wild technique, right? So I woke up, I kept myself in a low power mode operating state. I grabbed my little book light. I had a book about lucid dreaming that I was reading, and I just turned it on and I read until I started feeling really tired. And then when I did, I put the book down and I set the mantra. I repeated a mantra that I was going to be able to recognize that I was dreaming, and then that I would see something that would make me realize I am dreaming. And I just kept repeating that intent. Now, that's the trick with the wild technique. You have to keep yourself gauged for sleeping. You can't look at your phone. You can't worry about what's going to happen at work. You have to keep this focused 100% on what you're doing, the task at hand. You can't slip. Otherwise, you'll have like really vivid dreams. You might be able to become lucid in them, but more often than not, they'll be really vivid dreams. Now, attaining the aha moment, or some other people like to call it punching through the atmosphere. Once you are able to do this, there is a certain vibration that envelops your body. At least that's how it is for me. I think it might be different strokes for different folks, right? Like I do a lot of meditating and I do a little bit of energy work, so I think I'm more sensitive to that. I don't know if a lot of other people feel that, but for me, I sometimes feel like I'm being like scanned into the Matrix or something. That's how it feels. Like I feel my body or my amorphous blob of energy materializing and collecting itself. Now, a clear difference between this level and the next is the fact that you are still susceptible to the subconscious constructs that you unknowingly apply to the dream state, such as me trying to force myself awake and not being able to. Now, when I was trying to force myself awake, I remember perceiving difficulty because of what I had just seen in the mirror. For whatever amount of reasons, whether it be one or many, I perceived that there would be an issue with me getting back to my waking body. And so when I tried to exit out of the dream state, my belief of me having difficulty leaving actually kept me anchored in, and I just yo-yoed up and down until finally the need to escape was so overwhelmingly potent that it overwhelmed the thoughts and the expectation of difficulty. Let's move on to the next one. Level 6, Full Lucid. Now, becoming full lucid is different from regular lucid the same way leisure you differs from you in your hustle mode. In hustle mode, your focus is sharper. The same way in your dream state, when you're full lucid, your control over the scenery is far greater. You can freely interact with the scene or start a new dream altogether while remaining lucid. And your dream call is immaculate. Now, I actually have a really good example of a level 6 full lucid dream, or I should say series of dreams, because in the first dream I was able to attain a heightened level of lucidity, and even though I spawned in 2 other dreams, I carried that lucidity right over with me. Sunday, October 1st, 2020, 9:16 a.m. I went through 3 successful lucid dream phases last night. They were pretty fast and short-lived, but the retainment of lucidity was what stood out to me. In the first one, I was in a kind of dojo in a courtyard next to a small pond, practicing these water style bending techniques. I don't know if anyone listening to this has seen Avatar, but I was in these karate martial art positions, practicing the flow of energy, and I could see the water slowly coming from the pond and going near my body. I had looked around and I had began to question the scene, and I looked at the clothing that I had on, and I was dressed like a, what are they, warrior monks or something? I was dressed like I was training, right? Like I was training and stuff. So from just noticing the clothing that I was wearing, I was able to become lucid. Now, instead of breaking away from the scene, I decided to continue with it because what I was doing was already so interesting. So, I formed a small ball of water in my hand, and I managed to retain the spheric shape of that ball. I remember feeling the energy flowing into this ball and how excited I was, and then I wanted to change the shape of it. And it went from a ball to what's called a Metatron star. It's gonna take me a while to explain to you what a Metatron star is, so whenever you feel good, take the time to do some research. But it's essentially 2 triangles turned upside down on each other. I then turned the water-shaped Metatron star into this Rasengan-esque ball into my hand and watched it for a bit. Just seeing it like spiral through and circulate with this blue and white glow to it. It was so cool. It was the sensation was amazing. Now from there, the scene transitioned into another dream where I was standing in what resembled my old apartment with all of this old furniture that I had. 2 people came to my door and knocked. Lucid, I was like, what is happening right now? So I went to go open the door, and I saw just these 2 people, a guy and a woman, standing at the door, And before I could ask who they were, they just walked in. And they started asking me questions about the apartment because they wanted to move in and they wanted me to move out. They even offered to help me move out. And that, like, I had been wanting to leave that place for a bit, but the abrupt and suspicious offer, I completely told them no. And from there, they felt some kind of way. I could see that they were dismayed by my denial. They said they needed somewhere to stay and they wanted to know how long I was going to be there for. They were insistent on helping me move my things out, even though I had the impression that they wouldn't be staying for very long. It didn't seem like they were moving in for good. It just seemed like they wanted me out. So they said they needed to stay somewhere for 32 days, and I was like, that is extremely weird. Now, from there, the scene transitions into me standing outside of my mom's house on a nice bright day. I remember feeling like I had to get going to work, but I knew in my waking life that I had just finished my last work day. And before I could investigate the scene any further, my alarm woke me up. So the cool part about this night is that I was able to remain conscious throughout these 3 dreams. I was able to interact and be within the scene and move around within the scene without succumbing to the sway of the scene, without letting the scene take hold and dim the lights of my consciousness to where things go back to being fuzzy flashes of images. This is a defining point of the level 6 lucidity, which is the clear and concise dream recall that one has. I still, it's been 2 years. It's been literally over 2 years since that dream, and I still remember talking to these people. Now, in the future, I'm going to be talking about dreams of prophecy, dreams of like, future telling and stuff. And I'm going to be pointing out this dream again because in the second dream, these people told me that they needed to stay at my apartment just for 32 days. Now, when I woke up, I realized that in 32 days, it was going to be my birthday. And I also, at that time, had a roommate. And around the time of my birthday, he started seeing a woman. And before the end of that month was through, he ended up moving out to go live with her and do more to himself than he should have. Now, I'm excited to share my thoughts and everything else in that. And we will be talking about that next time. Let's move on to level 7, which is hyper lucid. Now, level 7 for me is hyper lucidity because the amount of awareness, we're not even talking about cognitive faculties, we're just talking about pure awareness now. When you are able to access the stage 7, the level 7 consciousness of the dream state, you no longer have a sense of self, a sense of ego, a sense of anything really. You are existing. You are just pure feeling. You're just literally awareness, and nothing else matters other than this pure, blissful, overwhelmingly enduring emotion that is oh man. This level is what I would consider to be the stage of enlightenment. This is For me, this is the level that the Tibetan dream yoga refers to, because there's, like I said, there's no sense of anything else but awareness. There is no waking construct to be applied to this dream state. There is no thought process to be applied. There is just existence. And even sometimes you slip out of that. I don't have too many dreams of this blissful stage. It's not an easy stage to get to. Like I said, you have no waking construct, you have no ego, you have no self. You have whatever you have done in this life leading up to this podcast, on whatever day you've listened to it, would have to be dismantled in your dreams for you to feel this state. Now, it's as difficult as you make it, and it is as easy as it sounds. Because in reality, this is a stage that you will stop you from feeling. In order to access this stage, there are some practices where one would simulate their own death in their dream state in order to kill off the ego and kill off self and the waking construct. There are people who would enact a simulation of dying in order to attain this energetic state of enlightenment, and there's more than one way to skin a cat. Now, this dream, I don't have an exact date for, because this dream was super early on. This dream was I've been in this thing for like 5 years now. This was 5 years ago. This was like the first or second month that I had been working on lucid dreaming. In Robert Wagner's second book, Lucid Dreaming: Gateway to the Inner Self, Robert has somebody who is talking about their dream where they wanted to feel what it was like to be the universe. They then felt themselves become the universe, expand beyond the perception of persona and everything else. And I remember reading this and I was like, this is gonna have to happen. I have to become lucid and I have to give this a shot. So this night that I'm referring to, as I'm preparing to fall asleep, I'm so excited to go through this experiment. I'm repeating the mantra in my head to realize I'm becoming lucid and realize I'm becoming lucid just so I can do this. And I have no recollection of where I became lucid in or at or where, whatever. I have no recollection, because the instant I realized I was dreaming, I shouted out loud that I wanted to feel what it's like to be the universe. And what a sensation. Have you ever felt your body expand into infinity? Because this is what happened to me. I slowly felt my body started to vibrate, and those vibrations just became stronger and stronger and stronger, and my eyesight began expanding horizontally and then vertically. The peripherals that I had from dreaming expanded. It was like, you know when you open your eyes to look at something much more, to like fully observe it. It was like my eyes opened up so much that the rest of my skull and head disappeared, and I saw everything. After my eyesight became completely expanded, I lost my first person point of view. I could no longer see with my two eyes, but I could still perceive what was happening. In this moment, I had no identification of Jose. I had no realization of where I was in my bed, or really that I don't even think I knew I was in a dream anymore, because it just, like I said, it went from me having any and all construct to just me, to just being. It didn't feel like I was a singular person anymore. It just felt like I was everything around me. And all of the sudden, the sensations started fading. The sensations of self started to form again, and it wasn't soft and gentle. It was like being sucked through a vacuum. The ever expanding, the infinitely expanding awareness that had grown into had suddenly just been compressed all the way back into one small amorphous blob of energy, of retained consciousness. As my awareness was shoved back into this blob of energy, the scene began clashing back together. Everything began to be violently put back together, and the sensations of being funneled back into this blob of energy woke me up. This is one way to feel this sensation. This is what I mean when I say there's more than one way to skin a cat. I was able to feel the embodiment of awareness, which some would call enlightenment. I most definitely would. Had stripped away all the waking constructs and everything that defines what we would call our mental barriers, our morals, our issues, our faults, our strengths, our weaknesses. I had grown past everything, and I was able to feel that sensation of harmony. Now, I can't give you the guidelines to become enlightened, because I really don't think it's just that easy. Like I said, in order to hit that level, you got a lot of work to do. There are experiments and stuff, but there are people who practice and work on this their entire lives to feel the sensation. Oh. Now, the last thing I want to mention about this dream is the sensations that I awoke with. The feeling of harmony, and the feeling of I want to say contentment, but not in a negative connotation. The feeling of just being satisfied, of really just having no issue with one thing or the other. That feeling stood with me for a couple of weeks, because at this time I was working for 2 big rideshare companies, and I was consistently, doing one ride after the next, after the next, after the next, and everybody and their grandma has an issue. Everybody has a struggle, and I'm never the person who shies away from that stuff. I actually love talking to people about the things that make them tick and what's going on with their life. And sometimes I go home with those icky feelings and whatnot still like saturated in my body. And it was great having this sensation and being able to talk to people from a position of not even power, just emptiness. Like I wasn't swayed by one thing or another. I was still me, but I wasn't reactionary me. You know what I mean? I wasn't. It's I don't know how else to break that down. I just I don't have a map to get to that level, because it requires, like I said, it requires you stripping down the whole of who you are. And if you don't take it serious, and you're just trying to attain enlightenment because you hate who you are, you're only gonna ruin the rest of your life, because you'll just spend the 2/3 trying to squeeze into that third, and That's just very counterintuitive, counterproductive. Get off the counter, all right? I hope I was able to provide adequate examples for everyone who hasn't been through the lucid dreaming steps to really be able to gauge themselves going through these levels. Keeping a dream journal with you so you can really mark these levels and ask yourself, what kind of level was I at? This is the greatest way to develop the ability to have your dream recall, which will trickle into your lucid dreaming abilities. And luckily for us, or luckily for you, our next episode is going to be covering dream journals. The who, what, when, where, whys, and hows. Till next time.